Let everybody know, no official action.
Right.
First time in 9 years.
You can do the roll call, Carla, and then we'll indicate that there's no quorum available to take official actions. We can't approve claims, we can't approve minutes, we can't do anything, but we can show who was here.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, that's
Let me
fine.
call the meeting to order first.
Okay, thank you.
I'll call the meeting to order for the Johnson County Solid Waste Management District at 1:39 p.m., July 10th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Brian Baird.
Here.
John Graham. Ron West. David Lexi. John Ditmars.
Here.
Mark Myers. Kevin Walls.
Here.
Thank you.
Sir, you do not have a quorum.
Okay, we do not have a quorum, so no official action will be taken today. First time in 9 years that I've seen this happen. So we'll have some discussion. I'm sure the board would like to hear some updates on some of the tornado relief. And if anything else, anybody from the audience wants to talk about anything, we cannot take any official action today. So it'll just be discussion. So.
Great. Well, if I may then, since it is going to be discussion and we still have our CAC representative here, if we could start maybe with having Mark come up and just talk about what the CAC has been doing. And he has his family with him, which is pretty neat. Learning a little about government in our meeting, I guess, and what happens when you don't have a quorum. Yes, exactly. So.
Yeah, most of it you don't want to know. Trust me, after 11 years.
These are our future leaders here.
That's good.
Yeah. The CAC meeting, our board has still continued to meet. We have discussed the tornado issues and maybe the lack of some communications that might need to be made in those departments. Kind of scares us when a storm comes up now. We are very excited about the new building and the new facility that's coming up, and so that's kind of centers around some of our discussion, some of the things that we want to see happen in that new facility. So we also have approved a budget for you, but I'm assuming that you can't do anything with that today.
Can't do anything about it. Right.
But do you have a copy of the budget? Yeah. So any questions that you might have?
Okay, questions? Board have any questions?
And actually, John, you may not be aware, but the solid waste district is still one of the only special districts that requires a citizens advisory committee. So we will always have a citizens advisory committee on our agenda in some capacity if we have something to discuss that has happened at a meeting, or we try and have them here. That we're supposed to have a joint meeting twice a year. Mark is representing that citizens advisory committee, and Mark has been with us since I've been here, so 12 years. Were you
Has it
here
been that
before
long?
me? Yes, it has been here that long.
Yes, we were before
August
you.
1st.
Yeah.
Yes, and so that's what
So
I thought.
probably 13, 14 years or so I've been on this.
Thank you for that. That's informative, and I'm working on not being new and becoming more informed. And that's helpful.
Well, that's one of those things that since nobody else still has to do it, but the legislature for whatever reason has determined we do, it's unique still to solid waste districts. So.
We've changed a lot in those 12 years or so, but I do think we're headed in the right direction.
Mhm.
I do.
Thank you.
Other questions?
No, thank you for your commitment.
Oh, you're welcome. So yeah, let's talk those storms. We will be meeting with FEMA, or I will be meeting with FEMA in regards to the Whiteland storm on Thursday. Basically, from our standpoint, it really has more just to do with personnel and the coverage that we did specifically for the storm to ensure that both the area, mainly the fairgrounds, was covered, plus the time that I spent out in Whiteland community. So that's what our focus will be when we meet with FEMA on Thursday. Of course, we have to answer all the same questions about the bills and the tonnages. So I've been putting together some of the tonnage report. We obviously, that won't give a true picture, because things like those fields being completely picked up, even though we provided the bins and different things. So I'm gonna kind of guesstimate, doing what I do for just because as in your disaster debris plan, we actually do have a way of guesstimating how much material it actually ends up depending on the acreage and different things. So I intend to add that to the numbers that I do actually have from New Genesis and also from GFL. This past storm was very unique in that, well, not unique, but very different in that it's kind of the polar opposite of the first storm, just in the way in which it hit the area in which it hit. So unfortunately, the whole board isn't here, but from the standpoint of the district and having this be our first time kind of going down an arena where it wasn't FEMA reimbursed, I do think that there is opportunity to possibly look at ways in which we could maybe create funding for some of these that will not be directly paid for by outside organization, because we are still putting ourselves in a situation of who's going to clean up in these, unincorporated areas. And that is certainly something that we don't address in a plan per se, but I don't think that we couldn't address it. And I think that using what has happened in White River would be a great example. What do we do? Do we look to HOAs? Do we, what happens if it's unincorporated but still a part of Barkersville or still a part of Greenwood? I mean, what is our piece to play in that beyond me going, okay, I can get the bins there, let me help you with the rotation and so forth? Because in reality, obviously, these are expenses that are not reimbursable. And in some capacity, I mean, it's not just a simple $500 bill. I mean, it's at least $500 or $1,000 a day. And even more so. I don't know what Stephanie has come up with. I know today we were working on some billing today, but there are still bins out there. So, and also who handles that as well to make sure that those bins are, the material is being captured properly. I do know that for the most part, they have not had any problems, but I also, Carla, wherever she is, Carla started getting phone calls today because of course some people were still on vacation and different things and, saying, okay, well, this refrigerator is in my pond. Who's going to handle this? This is, well, the reality is even if that white good came out, that white good couldn't go into the bin that we have provided the way in which we've provided it as a county. So I think that there is definitely room for conversation because unfortunately, given our current environment, it seems like these storms are going to keep coming. So I just think as a board, and certainly I know Stephanie and Betsy, being able to just say, okay, kind of here's our initial plan, Luke, how can we move forward? What can we look to? We too have $1 in our disaster debris area. That is where the FEMA money will come into, but is there opportunity to increase our revenue in some capacity that could help to ensure that some of that money is set aside as the solid waste district dealing with debris? Because
why does FEMA not cover the?
There's a threshold you have to meet.
Really?
Mhm.
A threshold of, in terms of damage?
Money.
Cost
Cost.
So-
until it gets triggered.
Okay.
No, it's 12 million for the Department of Homeland Security and 20 for FEMA, I think.
Is it really 20 million? And we met
And
that
that's-
requirement at Whiteland. It did not in unincorporated.
There's a clarification with that. It's uninsured.
Oh,
They
So
only
that's
cover
what-
the difference in.
it's so different. The two storms are this.
Where they hit. is
Yeah.
It's the demographic of where it hit and
You have a lot more insured in the area
Yeah.
that this last storm came
well,
from.
and your HOAs have $0.
Right.
They'll have nothing.
No, I know.
I mean, I deal with HOAs all the time. Who's going to clear the silt out of our pond?
I mean, it would be,
Well, I'm just saying that being able to know,
I would, I mean, it's just, we're just talking today. I
Yeah.
mean, either an excess levy because we are a special taxing district that we can put monies aside that can be utilized only by this board in cases like this, because I've been boots on the ground on this both of them, but this last one especially, and there are so many unforeseens dealing with blocked waterways.
Sure.
DNR will not let you touch it because they like bugs and bunnies. So they just let the streams flood. And if it's your property, it's flooding, you're not real happy. Who's gonna pull those debris out of those streams?
Betsy, does Jacoa have money?
We've got fields full of metal. Who's gonna pull that out?
Pull it out.
Does the COAD have money?
Yeah, does Jacoa still have any money left over from the flood?
Luke sent me something today. There was a source through the state that we can deal, what was it? I don't know. I don't have my computer in here right now.
Yeah, the COAD does have some money, but I believe that money is being used to help with the FEMA long-term recovery in Whiteland right now, because construction experts, case managers, stuff such as that. I believe that money is funding those positions currently.
Betsy and I were on that board when the flood happened in Franklin. Jacoa was established from the United Way. And I know they had money at one point in time, but
They did.
Yeah.
You're right.
I mean, if we keep it, if we collect that money for solid waste, then this board would be the ones that would utilize that funding to pick. There are just so many. I mean, I know Jesse's been shuttling dumpsters in and out of the White River Township area for the last couple of weeks solid.
Sure.
And plus there's still, like she said, refrigerators in ponds. Who's gonna go get that? But you hit it. The HOAs have no funding. They have zero and they're not willing to, they're willing to call you and tell you when they need another dumpster, but they don't want to pick up the bill.
Yeah.
So, and it might help the council out because we'll be coming on this last one, because it's gonna, and all the debris removal. I mean, that's gonna be a very, very, very large bill for all the tree removal that we've pulled out of there. And I mean, we've got, I don't even know, probably 8 crews.
And this is what we talk about
At 4:20
too. I mean,
an hour.
again, we talk about that
3
first
weeks.
4872. It's the most important thing is
But we need
people's
to talk
lives,
about
but
someplace
after that,
like
it is all storm debris and costs, and those costs aren't just everyday jobs. I mean, and it's funny because I sat in here with Franklin Police Department and Fire Department when we were doing the FEMA, and they said, "Why are we here? We didn't have overtime. We did our job." And we said, "Well, you might be able to support in your numbers and doing different things." So what is vital, life, obviously, first 4872, in a lot of instances, they view as just their job. They're not calling in extra people. It's volunteers, it's other people. It's after that 72 hours, the 2 months, the 6 months, the 9 months, all those expenses still continue to pile up. And that is where the bulk of your money comes from.
Mhm.
So it's just something that I do think that we should look at as we're moving forward, given the fact that we do have that opportunity.
Kind of wish we weren't looking at it, but I think we have to look at
Yeah.
it.
And as I mentioned before, our levy couldn't, as we've been talking to DLGF, we don't get pointed out, we get pointed out every single time how minuscule our levy is and the impact we have, especially considering we do represent the county as an entirety. So, I mean, I think you would be surprised at how little impact it ultimately would have on certainly Joe Q resident, especially given the benefit it would gain them in this situation. So however you would like to move forward with that, whenever we can move forward with that.
Well, board members are here. I'd sure like to hear our financial. We have 2 financial experts sitting in the room. I'd love to hear at least some advice from them. You thought you were going to get off the hook today. Angela saying, "Go ahead, Pat."
Thank you. Glad to be here. I got the first draw. I think, I've talked about that. I think to the extent we get an excess levy, then put that money as we've been doing for several years for the board directed funds. So that, as I've talked to, just don't have money in the budget to be spent. It's at the discretion of the board. And I think that's kind of what we talked, that would be good for this, to say, let's get some excess levy. Our rate is so low. We still have the bond issue coming up. We still got those issues we have to deal with. But even at that, our rate is so low that we could assist the county in financing some of this debris removal
really at the direction of the board and not putting in a specific account that's just available to spend.
Yeah.
So I think you and I talked, Kevin,
Yeah.
that would be a good avenue to try to go down and get our levy. It's so low right now, it just, it would be of little consequence to the taxpayers of our county, but still generate funding so that we have these disasters. This board could say, we're going to allocate X number of dollars to go fix some of these issues. So,
I wanted to hear it from you and not me. So,
Feels like contingency funding. Having.
That's exactly what it is.
For contingency funding, and we have a
right,
case in point right here, right?
Right.
exactly.
Fortunately, we haven't had to use it for a
Right,
while.
exactly.
We have $1 in yard waste disposal.
Right,
With the intention of being able to transfer
Never
money
build
into
that.
there.
Placeholder.
Is there anything else that?
Well,
Get that.
while you're up there. Do you want to discuss our conversation with DLGF and what we, moving forward?
In a go-forward basis with our budget, because Kevin, you and I have had the conversation. How do we have our new building? And try to still stay within a reasonable budgetary process that we have. And I think, at least my initial thought was, we're gonna be able to get out of this, our current building within the lease terms. We're gonna be able to get this new building up and ready for occupancy within that time. But I think for whatever reason, we're having some issues with, I mean, it's having issues with
financing.
pricing and financing. So, I mean, we've got to get that together. We've got to get that, put a bow around that so that we can start. Because we're getting up to the position where we're going to be renting a building outside normal lease terms.
Hmm.
Or we're going to have to
If
move
it
that somewhere else,
Mhm.
in the interim, and I'm not sure the county has a building that we can move all that stuff to. So, and I understand that those are things we just have to do as a district to get that moving forward. But from within our budgetary, we're looking at that transition. I think it's going to be an issue right now that we're going to need more money. And I did talk to Lynn a little bit about, what kind of cost we can push into a bond issue. But I think we're going to have a bond levy, which the DLGF says we can absolutely do. I was hoping we could reduce one levy and increase the other. The option of that I don't see on a go-forward basis. I mean, the time is getting too close.
Mhm.
But we have that ability to get another levy for debt service levy.
Well, I will let you know, since we don't have a quorum today, that I'll reestablish a date in the very near future that we will have a meeting to hopefully get some closure on some of this.
That'd be good. I
Okay.
appreciate it.
I
Good.
I think that's it. It's kind of, I don't know what else to say beyond, obviously, we know we need to move forward because of that April 2025 deadline. As I think Lynn and both Commissioner West had mentioned, I don't know that they would even let us stay on, and if they did, what that would look like. I don't know if that's a conversation that we need to have today, but
So you can't work from home on this?
yeah, yeah, I mean, we just can't really collect
That was no pun
recycling that
intended
way.
there.
So,
Oh, they probably relet to us, but it would be an
exorbitant, yeah. So, but in all of that, I will say, since we do have that set aside, as far as the budget goes, we obviously didn't really change much of anything. We're just waiting on the council guidelines on 3, 4, or 5%. So that's why you see there's 3, 4, or 5% out there. Otherwise, we made very few changes because we don't know what we can change. We had also discussed when we passed the budget The reason why that the hourly rate was so much higher and there was only the dollar in the recycle supervisor is we were hoping for that full-time position. We do believe that the person should be graduating at the end of October. So we would transfer, it's 8,500 to cover everything for her to be able to come full-time as the recycling supervisor, which in some ways will help us tremendously because then there will actually be 4 of us. In other ways, it's terrible because we have once again lost a part-time person and the other 2 people are leaving for college. So if anyone knows of anybody, Pat, retirement gig. I mean, come on. It is great. Actually, most people are like, this is the best job I've had, including our retirees, because we try and treat them with the utmost respect and our patrons love them too. So it's actually a pretty great place. It's not like McDonald's. You don't have to worry about ketchup getting thrown in your face, you know, when you don't get the order right. But yes, so at least that piece we'll hopefully have together. Still just always working on those part-time pieces. And just working with Pat and Angela to continue on with the budget and speaking with our council member on going forward when we have that budget hearing and what things will look like. Because again, in order to fund, will probably look a little different than just the basic that we've been doing for the past 12 years that I've been here.
I just have a couple things, if we might, just for informational purposes, given our restrictions here. As we typically do this time of the year, we begin receiving notices as required by law of TIF district assessed valuations and whether or not there would be any excess money collected from the TIF that would be coming back to the district. As I'm sure you are not stunned, none has been identified to be coming back to the district from these various TIF assessed areas. We did receive one from Trafalgar. We received one from Whiteland. We also received the notice from Greenwood, and each have determined that there is no excess funds coming back. Quite frankly, we've never done much about it. Not a whole lot to do.
From a
Since-
process standpoint, Lynn, is that an annual?
Yeah,
It's an annual
Yeah.
piece of work, right?
yes, sir. They're required to, when they establish a TIF district, they're required to identify the funding that they've received, the allocations and the monies that have been spent, the TIF district establishing area. So it would be your RDCs from each individual place. And then notify the districts, or I'm sorry, notifying the taxing entities that are not receiving those property taxes as virtue of the TIF as to how much was collected, what they did with it, and if there is any excess above what they're going to spend, they would then go back to this district.
So it's basically an impact disclosure on those. right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Great way to say it. And I don't know that I've ever seen one where there's money coming back when they've collected in the allocation areas. But there was the notice sent to us, which is done and required by law. The other thing I would say to you, that at the next meeting, I will be bringing you a farm lease. As you know, we have our approximately 2.9, our 3-acre tract that we own that we do not occupy now. Mr. Linville previously farmed that acreage. And at closing, when we bought our parcel of property, he mentioned something about could he farm it this year? And I said we'd be open to it once you get back with us later on. Then when planting season came around, quite frankly, he forgot he just planted it. He farms the rest of it. And there's a couple acres that are there. He planted it, called apologizing. His lawyer was out. It was Jim Admire, was gone. Jim called me and said, I'm sorry, we didn't mean to trespass. Do you want us to rip it out? I said, no, why don't you just pay us for what you would normally pay, which is about $600 for that farm rental. So I reached out to your president, who indicated to me that let's sit and we'll get I think Ron was concerned about the $50 drainage lien that we had to pay. Well, we got that, our $600 back in return for that. So I will have a farm agreement. But if you go by there and you see there are some crops on your property, that was as a result of that incident. So I'll have something formal for you next week.
If we don't have to tear it up, some of that for it.
By the way, this thing's moving.
Well, quite frankly, the flip side, I think council president indicated to me is if we didn't have somebody farming it, we'd have to be mowing it.
Yeah.
So it's just as well to have somebody else doing it, and he has insurance on it as well, so we're covered.
We have to at least harvest, I would think.
I mean, they might shoot some stakes in there, but other than that.
That was just all for informational purposes, sir, since we're all here.
I got anything else they would like to discuss today?
Gotta go to Smith Valley Road.
All right, well, I guess I will call this unofficial meeting to an adjournment.
You have that authority too.
It's an unofficial, so I can do it.
We will have minutes the next meeting. It indicate that no official action was taken, but we recorded the minutes to be approved by the entire board next time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.